and welcome to the Wellness with Juanita podcast. I'm your host, Juanita Nagai, an American living in Japan for 20 years. I've gone through some massive life changes and crises in my 20 years here. At its bleakest, I felt very isolated, alone, and helpless in the face of what was happening. I relied on alcohol and cigarettes to get through it the best I knew how, which worked until it didn't, and everything fell apart. I made it through with a little help from my friends, a fledgling mindfulness practice, and learning how to become my own strongest ally. I quit drinking and smoking, worked my way through my grief, found ways to forgive, created new connections, and started a regular exercise, meditation, and self-care routine. I've also become a national board certified health and wellness coach along the way, and developed a desire and passion to help others on their own personal journeys. This podcast is all about change, growth, healing yourself, learning how to get back up after life kicks you down, and exploring mindfulness and self-compassion as incredible tools available to each and every one of us to do just that. Hello, and welcome to the Wellness with Juanita podcast. I'm your host, Juanita Nagai, and today I am so excited to be joined by Gretchen Miura. Gretchen is a mindfulness meditation teacher and a grief facilitator, also a dear friend. So I'm really excited to have her on the podcast with me today. Thank you so much for joining me, Gretchen.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah.
Excellent. So I'm just going to introduce you a little bit, and then we'll take the conversation from there. So Gretchen is a mindfulness meditation teacher who went through the 2-year program offered by Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach. She's also taken many retreats over the years, including in Plum Village in France, where Thich Nhat Hanh spent many of his years in exile. And as a grief care facilitator, she has taken intensive training with David Kessler. And actually, I'll just stop there. And I'll let you kind of explain what led you to become a mindfulness meditation teacher and or a grief care facilitator, if you want to just introduce a little bit of your background to us.
Oh, sure. Well, I think they're really interconnected. And I actually was just sharing this yesterday that for me, the path to meditation came from sort of discomfort around deep, challenging emotions. I think we all have different paths to meditation if people meditate, but that was sort of my path. And actually, it was a lot around grief. I didn't know how to process grief or really uncomfortable feelings, such as anger. I was really conflict averse, and I just have felt really disconnected from my emotions and put so much emphasis on positive emotions and so that was sort of why I felt, I need something to help me get more in touch. And so it was just a very, very slow process. I began meditating in college. I was exposed to it and just really intrigued by it. And I think when you begin meditating, you have these brief glimmers of like calm. And then 99% of the time is not calm, but it's just enough of like that beginner's luck of like, there's something in here for me. And so this has been, many decades of a practice. So it's not really overnight, but sort of really intentionally and slowly, I became more comfortable with sitting with difficult emotions. Mm-hmm. And that really opened up a lot for me, including really being able to process grief. And then through that, I thought meditation is so important to me. I wanted to become a teacher as well as wanting to create more grief support. So they're really interconnected. And I use meditation in our grief support community. Even, of course, it's very secular and we have different styles of meditation, but I really value it very much in my life.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, that a lot of that really resonates with me. That 1% kind of calm or some kind of glimmer of something, and then 99% of the time it's like my leg hurts and I'm bored and am I doing this wrong? And all the many thoughts that pop into our heads. Yeah. Thank you so much, Gretchen. So actually, that's actually kind of a perfect segue into one of the first things that I wanted to ask you today, because you were such a huge part of my path and my story and really where I am today. I've mentioned this in different areas and I've mentioned it to you before. I know you're very well aware. But honestly, reaching out to you and asking you, do you have any thoughts on how to start a mindfulness meditation practice? Or do you have any books or resources, kind of that first email or message? I guess it was a message. I always think of it that night out on the deck, because it really has become this kind of watershed moment in my own story. So I'm just curious, actually, if you remember that first message at all, and if you do, what you thought about it.
Oh, I definitely remember your message. And I hope I've been able to articulate to you how valuable it was for me, because I think when people reach out to one another, you're both impacted by that. And I was really moved that you sought me out. And I started to think, at first I thought, I really don't know what I'm doing. Who am I to give advice or something like that? I think a lot of us struggle with that. But I started to think, oh, maybe this is something that I could offer other people. And I really value relationships and community. And so sort of having that connection, really impacts both of us. So I definitely remember the first message. I remember really taking it seriously and thinking, and I was really just recommending books, I think. And a lot of them you'd already heard about, but it was sort of just nice to talk about them. And then I remember we had a phone conversation later, like a FaceTime type of thing. And it was just like clicking. It was like click, 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 just like we had so many overlapping interests. And I know that you were in the really raw, difficult aftermath of your mother dying, which it's, now my mother's passed away. So we sort of have that other bond of these layers, and how valuable it was to me to sort of begin that relationship and that friendship. And I do really value, I think I've said this before too, like spiritual friends, like people you can talk about really deep things sort of quickly. I unfortunately think suffering brings that sort of immediacy to relationships. But I also think it's something we need in society, like just who do you talk to, and I thought it was so brave of you to reach out to me. It really was. It moved me. I thought, wow, asking for help, reaching out to people is so powerful. It really is. So of course I definitely remember it.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And I appreciate you saying how impactful it was for you too, and that you think it was very brave. But there's this part of me that's like, well, I was really drunk and I was really, really desperate. And I think both of those things were in like completely equal proportion. Like I really just was like, I need something else. And like you said, I mean, that suffering was the doorway into my own path, into exploring mindfulness and meditation. And like I've heard other teachers and other people speak of this, that, there aren't a lot of happy, shiny people that are like, hey, I want to take up meditation. It's usually some kind of suffering, whether it's, grief or like their own, inner demons or some traumatic experience. It's usually pain that's pushing us into exploring other ways of being with that pain or other ways of exploring it. And then it can just take off in so many other directions, So I also, it's not like after reaching out to you, I was on the road and like I was meditating every day after that, it was just like, okay, well, I'm going to read this book. And I agree. Like, I feel like now that I look back and I think about it, I actually just reread that message, and you were talking about Ram Dass and you mentioned Tara Brach, and And I just think, oh man, like I really just needed that little push, because I did know Ram Dass already, and I needed those names as the first step. And it really just kind of started clicking into place for me. Like the practice came later, but the kind of exploration, it all started from that. I wanted to ask you though, too, it sounds like that was all kind of part of your process of starting to realize, well, this is something I can offer people. Maybe there is something there. And I wonder if that was kind of coinciding with you starting to think about starting Lighthouse Circle, or was that not in the cards just then, or how did that kind of all come to be?
Yeah, so I was already running mindfulness retreats at our temple. So mindfulness and meditation was already a big part of my life. And I was slowly, tentatively getting more comfortable with being a teacher, because that's actually really hard, right? Like my husband's a Zen priest, so I was always like pushing him to do it and like sort of hiding behind him. And so that was sort of going on. And then, so again, when you reached out, I remember thinking, within sort of well-being or mindfulness or meditation, sort of grief is important to me. So that was sort of like a seed. And then, as I've shared before, what I'm talking specifically about my grief is like a childhood loss. My brother died. And so it's very long ago, but it was largely unresolved, right? Just sort of unprocessed, not dealt with. And I think sometimes when we have childhood, either trauma or loss, you experience it as a child, but then you don't know how to sort of recalibrate it and integrate it into your adult life. And then I've also heard this, which I think is so fascinating. If you lose someone as a child, like you're 15 or 17, and your parent was like maybe 40, when then you turn 40, a lot comes up. Those type of things, like those sort of symbolic ages. And then for me, what happened is when my brother died when he was 17. And then when my son was 17, just a lot started coming up for me. And like you, it wasn't just like boom overnight. It was like, oh, this is going to be hell. This is going to be hard.
Right.
I remember thinking like, there's so much like just so much compacted and like solidified inside of myself that I had to sort of start peeling it away. And so I think that was sort of going on at the same time, but not at all thinking about becoming like leading grief support. But then during COVID, there was just all this stillness and silence. And that was sort of quite nice for me. I know it was a difficult time, and our family ourselves had some difficulties, but there was sort of this almost like retreat-like quality to life. And a lot sort of after these years of really trying to work through my grief, and after really having a meditation practice, a lot of ease came into my life around the grief. And I know some people don't like this word, but a lot of healing came around. So not that, you can ever fix the sadness, but for me, I started to feel like I could integrate a lot of that loss into my life. And I felt quite whole around it. Yeah. And I was sharing this with, I think, our mutual friend, and we've collaborated in different spaces, Sarah Furuya, who's a life coach. And she just was like, this is powerful. And it's sort of similar to our relationship, having somebody else see something in you, or see like people need to hear this. And we've talked a lot publicly about this as well. As a coach, a lot of her clients would come with loss, and they weren't even saying this is the number one issue, but it was just impacting everything. And sort of, we started to think, where is the support around grief? And a lot of people tend to shy away from grief. It's sort of just, what?
It's not talked about. Yeah. I mean, we don't as a culture talk about it. Yeah.
We don't. And people think it's like depressing and all this stuff. But all of these things are sort of coming together. The conversation and the messages we were sort of exchanging, that little seed of like, oh, wait, I'm comfortable. Like, it's weird because it was like I was sort of comfortable talking about that. Like I wasn't like, oh my God, I don't want to talk about death. I don't want to talk about loss. And
Right.
sort of becoming a mindfulness teacher and thinking, well, how am I going to use this? What is my real passion? And then having this own deeper sense of ease around my own grief from childhood, other griefs too. So it just sort of came together really nicely. So yeah, a lot with my relationship with you, and then also with Sarah, who was sort of saying, this is something valuable. Maybe we could offer it to people. And so, and then I got a little bit more serious. And like you said, I did this intensive training with David Kessler, and it was actually brilliant. I loved it so very much. It's very dear to me. And then maybe a little bit like you, I don't want to project, but it's like, let's put something out in the world. You know what I mean? Like with your, wellness coaching, it's like,
yeah,
let's do meaningful work. And it's sort of scary, and then you have to be really vulnerable, and you're taking a risk, and you don't really even know the contours of it yet, but it started to take shape. And then you joined Lighthouse Circle because I remember reaching out to you.
Right.
And so that was sort of our first round, but it's just grown into something that's very meaningful to me personally. So I'm really happy.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, because I actually have always been kind of curious, like what exactly happened with you. Of course, I know it was happening with me in between that kind of first message and when I joined the first round of Lighthouse Circle. So thank you for sharing how it kind of started coalescing and all these different threads in your life were kind of coming together to create this amazing thing. And I will share, as you said, I joined the first round of Lighthouse Circle, and it is a 6 months grief support group. And we had once a month online meetings, and then there were also different aspects like rituals or prompts or different things to explore our grief personally in our own way and in our own times. I really just appreciated that space because, like you said, we don't really know how to talk about grief in our culture. And we, even with my sister who also lost her mom, it would feel kind of hard to bring up grief sometimes because, it's like, well, are you feeling okay today? I don't want to bum you out when I need to vent or something on my own, like for me, I don't know. A lot of it is just like, I don't want to bring other people down. I don't want to make other people worry about me. And so it was great to have that space of like, everybody here is going through something and we can all just kind of be here in that same space and realize that that is the thread that brought us all here, but we don't need to fix each other. We don't need to do anything, but just try and work through it in whatever way feels best for us. When I was taking Lighthouse Circle too, my son was born. I do remember joining the calls with him in the carrier. But I feel like it was almost like a luxury that I wasn't working and doing kind of regular life, that there was this pause that I was finally able to really kind of get in there and do what I needed to do. So it was, it's really great. For anyone listening, I can't recommend Lighthouse Circle enough. It's a really wonderful place to be when you need it. Yeah.
Well, a couple of things you said, like, I agree. It's like after you lose somebody, I mean, it's like, how are you supposed to function and work and maintain your daily life? I mean, I was like, wow, how do people keep going? I really felt like that. It's so hard. Like you said, it's sort of a luxury to have that time. But nevertheless, people keep working, keep waking up, getting their kids to school, all that stuff. And so that sense of, like you said, just a space to go and just be yourself and just be able to have your grief be witnessed by other people. And actually, to your point, a lot of times the people that are grieving the same person, of course, you're close to them and they're really important. Like I really value that my sisters and I all share the same mom. So we can sort of, there's that shorthand to who she was and how we were raised. And I wouldn't trade that. I mean, I just need that so badly. But it's not necessarily who you want to talk about your grief all the time. And so that's this sort of different community of people that you don't necessarily know in your daily life is really sort of, I don't know, what is it? You know, it's like sort of that weird, like talking to strangers sometimes just feels lighter or freer.
I think it's liberating is the word that kind of comes to me. It's like, because when it is your family members, there is all this pressure and history and obligation and care. I mean, because you really do love these people. And that care, though, can also act as a barrier for what you need to process and what you need to share or get off your chest or rage at or whatever it is. I agree. It's a lot easier with strangers sometimes.
Very true. Yeah.
Something you just said about kind of like the way that it felt like to me that Lighthouse Circle was kind of created in this way to just kind of be a space and be a place where we could acknowledge our grief and honor it. And if we're lucky, perhaps process it, right? I mean, there's not any guarantee that there's going to be some kind of forward movement or anything, but just a place for it to be held. And it made me think of mindfulness and meditation in general. And as you mentioned, kind of both of those things were really important to you in your life. But like my experience with mindfulness meditation has become so important to me. It's become my non-negotiable. It's the one thing that I definitely need to do every day. And it's just become really important to me. At the same time, I also always kind of keep in the back of my mind this quote from Jon Kabat-Zinn. And I think it's from Full Catastrophe Living, where he's basically like, once you start meditating or once you start integrating mindfulness into your life, you are going to want to go out and sing it from the highest mountaintops, right? You're going to want to tell everyone you know. But he was like, don't do that. Just kind of like, just keep practicing. Just see what it does for you. And I've always kind of kept that, because that is exactly what happened. Like once I started really meditating, and it, it's all those cliches. It's like, I felt like, oh my God, I've been living in a dream, and I'm waking up and I'm starting to really have better understanding of like the way my mind works and how the world works or my place in it, all of these things. But also just keep going and just see what happens. So I'm kind of curious, has that been your experience, or how do you feel with sharing mindfulness, if that makes sense? Like, how do you integrate those things or balance those things?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's somewhat in keeping with the Buddhist philosophy. It's not a, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't go out and try to get people to follow it.
It's like proselytize.
Yeah. I'm like, there's a word for it, but it's like, you don't do that. So it's in keeping with that. And Zen is very much like that. You don't even talk about it. I mean, it's like the ineffable qualities of life, right? It's more about how you live, right? And so this is a deep interest of mine too. It's like, how does our inner journey reflect how we show up in the world? And to a certain degree, I think, of course, it's totally appropriate just to have it as your own practice. But there was a tipping point for me. I hope it was, held with humility, but there was a tipping point where I thought, this is something, particularly because I have a connection to a temple, that I thought, I want to at least offer it. I like the word offer. because it's not trying to grab people and say, you got to do that. Like, yeah, I don't, you live your life, I live my life. Like, I really don't mind how people live their lives, but it's like, this is something that's valuable. And
Mhm.
I'd like to offer it and share it with humility, you know,
Mhm.
and with a sense of we each have our own timeline and our own path. But to your point, I mean, I probably was meditating, 20 years before I even thought that I would become a teacher. And then I really struggled with that like imposter syndrome, which I think is sort of in a weird way important, because it's like, well, who am I? And then
Mhm.
you start to learn that it's like, actually, my mentor, Sebede Selassie, told me, like, just trust the meditation. Like, it's not about me. Like, you have to get over your ego and just sort of trust that
Mm.
this is something that's valuable for people and they can do with it what they want, or in Buddhism, it would be like, trust the Dharma, trust the
Mhm.
lineage of teachers, and how grateful I am that I've had teachers in my life and mentors in my life and guides in my life. And I have no doubt that many, many people in my life who've impacted me didn't even have a meditation practice, but they sort of imbued their daily life with a really deep presence. So I really don't
Mm.
mind. I have meditation. There's many styles of meditation. Um, so we each sort of gravitate towards a different style.
Right.
But for
Mhm.
me, it's also like, you have to know the rules to break them. So I did go through sort of an intense time of, I have to meditate like this. And Zazen, which is connected to Zen, which is probably my closest lineage, is quite strict, and so I
Yeah.
had sort of a strictness to it. But then I thought, this doesn't really resonate. I'm not a naturally strict, structured person. And so then I started to like be more like free with it, and bringing it into
Mm.
washing the dishes, taking a walk, like waiting for your
Yeah.
kids, like um making artwork, and sort of like, it's not meant to just be kept on the cushion, so to speak. It's meant to be part of our lives. And so I've become probably too, laissez-faire about it, because I feel like it should be part of your life. It should be breathing. It should be like sort of percolating in different parts. So you might benefit from some structure, particularly at the beginning, or when you really want to get a sense of who you are. But for me, it's then led to like a opening and a relaxing of it. But I appreciate what you're saying. But I think if we offer it as a skill of, this is something that's been useful and valuable to me, and I'm going to really try to offer it with a lot of humility and respect for the lineage. And then people can do with it what they want. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I obviously am very grateful and happy that you did decide to start offering what you had to share and the lineage. I mean, after 20 years, I really appreciate you explaining that kind of part of it. I am certainly like, I'm like 5 years in. I feel like such a newbie, but I do think that it's such a powerful tool
Mm-hmm.
for so many different things. And
Mm.
then the part of kind of philosophical part of my brain is like, it's really not meant to be a tool for anything except just being kind of, I don't know, open awareness. But I do think that it can be so helpful and it's so
Mm.
useful for starting to process those deep, dark emotions or the overwhelming things that happen in our life. It's become something that's really important to me. And it's something
Mm.
that I am always more than willing to share and to try and point clients in helpful
Mm-hmm.
directions if they show interest in it. But it's also something that I am very, very aware that people need to come to it in their own way, in their own time, if they are going to at all. Like meditation is
Mm.
not for everyone.
I think there's some different elements, like you were sort of alluding to, sort of this very deep spiritual element, philosophical element. But there's also just a practical element to it. And I don't think we have to disregard that. So, like you were saying before, like we've talked about grief, or I talked specifically about anger, but a lot of people use meditation just to sort of quiet their mind or quiet a sense of anxiety. So yes, we're not trying to intellectualize it, and ultimately we're trying to bypass mental activity and get to a state of nirvana. But realistically, daily life is not that. So can we use it as a skill, as a tool to sort of navigate life? Because life can feel overwhelming and stressful. And one thing I did that I ended up really loving is I've been teaching meditation almost on a weekly basis at a university here for students.
Okay.
It's actually, and I really sort of broke it down because I really wanted to keep it secular. And that was so helpful for me. It's like breaking it down for, you feel overwhelmed by homework, you feel overwhelmed by all the pressures of life, and this can be a tool, and so I see what you're saying, though. It's like, yes, there's a level that's sort of transcendent and deeply spiritual, but that doesn't negate just the practicality for daily life and the fact that we're not enlightened beings at every moment. So you can sort of, it's like for me, it's like two sides of one point, because it does offer a pathway to those really transcendent moments that are really profound, but they go like that. I mean, really, truly, like, you don't live in a state of, walking around like I'm one with the universe, even if you have moments of feeling that way. Like, there is the reality of, I have to go to work today. I have to pay my bills. I have homework, and it's a lot. It's a lot to manage. And there's also a deep sense of disconnection and loneliness and self-criticism, right? And I find that meditation, or a lot of the meditation I try to teach, is about offering yourself compassion. That, because mindfulness, at least the mindfulness that I teach, is about accepting the moment without judgment. That without judgment is so important. Just, this is, okay. And, just little by little offering yourself compassion. So I do think it's a skill. I think it's a tool. It's okay to use that for daily life. Even if other times you're really using it to go to a deeper spiritual place.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to have some of those blissed out transcendental moments, but I don't know that I've had any. But what I will say, though, I think is just, for me, it's been so valuable to be able to slow down, even in that daily grind and that daily rush, when I do have, just looking at the sky, or just noticing these moments that I think that we miss so often. Even this morning, I was out for a run and I was listening to my podcast, and I just happened to look up as I was passing this rice field, and there were so many dragonflies. It was hundreds of them, all flittering in the sun. And it was just this magical little moment. And I think that my meditation practice has helped me to start to kind of notice those moments, or recognize that those moments are all we really have, right? And so I think the noticing is really big for me. And I think also then taking that noticing and noticing the way that my own mind works has been so helpful in starting to untangle difficult emotions, right? Working with things like you mentioned, anger. That was a big thing for me as well. I don't even think about it as anger. It was rage and how that was such a kind of uncomfortable, completely unfamiliar experience for me. But as you said, learning more about self-compassion and not judging that and not trying to push that away, or, any of the many ways that we kind of cope or deal with things, but really starting to learn how to be with things a little bit more, when we are ready and able, when we're feeling resourced, right? We don't want to push too hard when it's too raw, but having the mindfulness to realize okay, these are thoughts. They're always popping up. These might be some of the thoughts that pop up a lot for me. That's just what they are. and being able to notice those and to start recognizing those and to have a little bit of, like a softening and less judgment around it, because that is so much of what I work with clients in the end. It's so much internal stuff, even if people want to work on their diet or their exercise or different routines like that, I feel like so much comes back to self-compassion and learning how to, just be with ourselves in a little bit kinder, gentler way.
I also think curiosity is really important. Like, okay, why do I keep, you start to notice these thoughts, and maybe it's a critical thought or a limiting belief, right? And again, if you can notice that without judging, like, oh, I always criticize myself when I do this, or why do I not imagine myself doing this thing? And again, if you can just not be judgmental about it and be like, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on here? And just, give yourself some space to be like, what is going on? I find it so helpful.
I think, and that idea that it all changes too, like one of the basic tenets of Buddhism is that everything is impermanent, right? But for real, I mean, and for me, I've gotten into a lot of the science of brain science and stuff, but it's something like emotions, actually, they only have a shelf life of 30 seconds, up to 90 seconds. But it's all of the crap that we put on top of it, all of the stories and all of the rumination and all that stuff. That's what spreads it out. And that's what holds it in our hearts and minds. But the emotion itself, I mean, it's come and gone. And it's all of our stuff that we're adding on top of it. So realizing that things change and that things can change even more quickly or more lightly, the less that we are holding on to them and kind of holding on to those stories that we have made in our minds and stuff. So, I mean, it's been so monumental in my own personal journey, right? I mean, honestly, just the kind of, I don't know, I feel a little cheesy even as a wellness coach saying the mindset work that I have done, but it's really true. I mean, I have found completely new ways to think about things, and things that felt very right or true with capital letters. Like, I'm right and this is the way things are. And, just learning to kind of loosen that grip and think about, like you said, with curiosity. Well, really? Is that really true with a capital T? Is there anything else that might also be going on here? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's so exciting that something can come into your life and really impact you. I find that really exciting to hear how important it's been for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, this is why I will probably gush until the end of our days, because I feel like you were so instrumental in bringing it into my life. So yeah, it's really amazing. And actually, I would love to talk a little bit about the retreats that you are doing at the temple. So can you tell us about your temple and the retreat? Because that is a wonderful way to experience meditation and mindfulness and all of these wonderful things that we've been talking about.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So I, like you, live in Japan, but I live in the north, and we were able to catch up in Osaka, which was really fun. But I live in Akita, and I live on a peninsula, so it's quite rural. But my husband is a Sotoshu Zen priest. It's sort of like the archetypal picture of a priest. Like, he shaves his head, he has the long robes, it's a temple. And so we host retreats in the fall. I think this is our 8th year, which is super exciting to do it. Yeah. And we only do it once a year. So it's like one of those, we've done it for a while, but it's not that often. But like I was saying before, I really thought I want to open up the temple so people can come and experience the temple and learn about Zen or different types of meditation. So that's sort of the main reason. And it's so important to occasionally just take time for yourself So I really feel like just even the process of like, I think like the retreat begins when you like get on the train, because you sort of slowly come up north. It's really beautiful. You sort of start to slow down. And I feel that the temple has like this sense of deep time. When you go to these places that have like a lineage, and it's just a very quiet place. It's like, okay, something's different here. And I just really wanted to welcome people into that space to like sleep and be there. And even if it's just a short amount of time, just come. And then in a way, it's like whatever they need. Each person needs something different, you know? So to reconnect with yourself, just take a deep breath, maybe learn something if you want to learn about the temple or Buddhism. And then we offer a few different types of meditation. So I guide the mindfulness meditation. Mindfulness meditation, as we've been talking a lot about, is about being aware of the moment without judgment. And a lot of times you use breath as sort of an anchor. That would be like the simplest explanation of mindfulness, but it's often guided. So you sort of have somebody talking through it. And I don't talk too much because I do like there to be spaciousness, but there's someone sort of talking through it. And I find it quite accessible and again, quite pragmatic. And then my husband does morning zazen. And zazen is the traditional meditation within Sotoshu. And I love that because, again, that's a very Japanese style of meditation. And a lot is focused on your posture, how you sit. There's a lot less talking, you know? So I think it can be quite challenging for people to do it because it's like, okay, sit here and just stare at a wall for 40 minutes. It's like, wait, what? Like, you know, but he explains it and introduces it. And I find it to be really great. So we try to balance those two out. But then we do other activities like yoga, because again, yoga, you know, the point of yoga traditionally through Hinduism and Indian culture was to support meditation. Very, very complementary. In fact, connected. And then we also do some activities that are creative because concentration is also a form of meditation, you know, like that flow state you were talking about, science, even walking meditation, because I like to expose people to different types of meditation because again, each person sort of something might resonate differently. So we do all of that. And, but a big part of it is also just the communal aspect. Again, we're sort of all in our little isolated bubbles and it's just nice. Like I really try to make it warm and welcoming and just a chance to sort of connect with people in sort of just this meaningful, simple way. Again, some people are introverted and need more space to themselves. So it's, you know, you can always sort of engage as much as you like, but there is sort of a coming together communal aspect. And there's even a little bit of a cultural aspect because, you know, we try to show a little bit of our community, eat some of the local seasonal food. And so it's not, as I mentioned before, it's not over serious because you can go do some temple stays and they're very austere and like stripped bare. And I've done those and I've enjoyed them. And so if that's something you're looking for, it's really valuable. But this is like, you know, you don't have to wake up at 4 a.m. and eat rice porridge. Like you can have a cup of coffee, you know, at like 7, you know, so it's sort of like I try to make it welcoming and fun and, there's an element of just joy. And I think people often are surprised when they come to the temple, not even for the retreat, but just to visit. Like my husband and I are just like normal, down to earth people. We've raised our children there. It's, you know, I think sometimes people are like, oh my God, I have to be so perfect and quiet and, you know, tiptoe around. It's like, no, I want people to come and relax and take a deep breath and, you know, do what you need. What, you know, if you want to talk all day or if you just want to take walks. And so again, it's an offering. It's an invitation to sort of come have that experience. So I enjoy it. I always get a lot out of it. I'm always sort of amazed. It's similar to Lighthouse Circle, just sort of the alchemy of people coming together for a weekend and how those are meaningful experiences to share with other people and learn something similar to Lighthouse Circle, like sort of this interesting, beautiful combination of people, this sort of moment in time. So I enjoy it so much. And so we do that. Well, usually in the fall, and this year it's October 25th. to the 27th. So it's a Friday to a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can hopefully just put a link in the show notes.
Yes,
so that's
absolutely.
And one thing I'll say, excuse me, we live sort of far away, like if you look at a map, but it's actually not hard to get to. And I've done some traveling in Japan that was way more complicated. So I just want to say, like, it looks far away, but it's sort of an easy trip. We pick you up at the station. And it's also just a great way to explore Japan. Like I've started to realize I like doing things that have like an activity around it. You know what I mean? So it's like, oh, I went to Oga or I went to Akita and I got to see this part of the country through this lens. So I just really encourage people to come and come, we've, even our conversation, like the idea of like learning something new, like the beginner's mind is actually the ideal mindset to be in. So even if this is completely new to you, it can be so invigorating and fun. Or you might walk away and be like, I don't really like mindfulness. I don't, again, like it's just for you to experience. So that is the retreat. It's really a combination of various meditations, community, local food, just having space and time in a different, in a quiet, sort of deep time place where you're like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the beauty of retreat, is taking that step outside of your normal, busy, hectic life. It sounds fantastic. And I'm so excited for you. It must be beautiful that time of year too, up north.
Well, that's why we pick it, because we have, koyo, like the autumn leaves, but it's not too cold. But I say that and I have to be careful, because last year some people were like, I'm cold. So we try to have the space heaters and the blankets because we're used to the cold. But it's sort of like, it's just a beautiful time of year, like the smell, and all the food, like the fall food is so good in Japan, all the nabes and stuff. So it's one of my favorite seasons, but not too cold yet.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I will definitely put links to both Lighthouse Circle and the retreat information in the show notes. So interested people can check you out and check out what you are offering in the next month.
Thank you.
And I was wondering, not to put you on the spot, but each episode I like to have a takeaway. So something for my listeners to either ponder on their own, or, perhaps a practice or something that they can do themselves and see what it's like, experience for them. So I was wondering, since I have you today, would you mind leading us? And I know you're coughing. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm okay. I'm okay. Yeah, sorry.
I was wondering if you would lead us on a brief, really basic guided meditation, just, a couple of minutes or something. So if someone is interested in exploring what it's like, just to get a little taste of what it's like.
Okay, sure. So we can end with a little meditation. So usually I just invite people to get comfortable sitting or lying down. And again, really feel your body. Sometimes we rush, we're meditating, but just really allow yourself, just take a few moments to really feel your body sitting, feel the weight of your body in the chair, or if you're lying down, and just take a moment and feel comfortable. This isn't super strict. And you can keep your eyes open. You can close them if that's comfortable. And then just take a moment to notice your surroundings, maybe your clothes on your skin, or the sounds around you, or the smells. Just really place yourself in the immediate environment. And then just take a moment to check in with any thoughts that are arising. You're just noticing them, just giving yourself a chance to check in with yourself. And then give yourself a chance to check in with any emotions that are present. And again, you can just do a scan. How are you feeling right now? Is there a sense of nervousness, or is there a sense of relaxation? We're not judging anything, we're just noticing it. And then just check in with your body. Are there any parts of your body that feel tight? Just bring your awareness to that, maybe your shoulders or jaw. Maybe just scan your body, maybe your lower back. And if it's available, you can just release a little bit of that tightness. If not, that's okay too. And then just notice any other sensations, any softness, any place of contact. You might feel your hands resting on your knees. And just allowing yourself to be here in this moment, just as you are, not changing or fixing anything. Then just bringing your attention to your breath. We're not going to control or manipulate it, but just notice your body breathing. Just notice where your body inhales, and then follow it through the exhale. And just resting your awareness on your breath for a few moments. Just breathing in and breathing out. Noticing the sensation of breath. See if you can differentiate between thinking about breathing and really feeling the sensation of breathing, the actual experience. Breathing in, breathing out. Your body is breathing itself, and you can just rest your awareness on the breath. And then as the meditation comes to a close, just notice 1 or 2 more full cycles of breath. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes if they were closed. And just take a moment to really rest in this little post mini meditation. Again, you could do another check-in. How are you feeling? How does your body feel? Don't need to rush through it. Just give yourself a moment. And then slowly re-engage with your surroundings. Maybe start moving your body, stretching. and just offer yourself a little bit of gratitude for taking that moment for yourself, just to be present with your emotions, your thoughts, your body, your breath. And yeah, if you can, take moments when you're waiting in line, or, you know, getting work done and you just need a 2-minute break, just sort of take that time to drop into your body, pay attention to your breath, and then you can return to whatever you're doing.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Gretchen. That was so lovely and such a nice way to finish up our talk today.
Yeah.
And it really kind of brings it all full circle for me, because that first message, I think the next morning you sent me some basic instructions to how to learn how to sit and just try and follow my breath. And so I really appreciate your meditation. I appreciate your time in taking this morning to talk to me. It's been so great talking to you. I appreciate it so much. And I will put all of the links in the show notes for Gretchen's offerings. Lighthouse Circle is starting again soon, and also the retreat at Dairyuji Temple up in Akita Prefecture will be October 25th through the 27th. So everyone, thank you for listening today. Take care, and I'll see you next time.